When you first contracted it, how did you, you say you didn't even feel symptoms for the first few days? How did you contract it? Did you realize, and when you look back, where you might have actually been
No,
exposed?
no idea. I mean, that's not true. I mean, I know the individual who got it before I did. He was a friend, coworker. We were at an event um, underneath the guidelines at the time. I think it was 500 people at the time. We were well underneath that. We were, trying to be smart as we possibly could, but your friends and I think actually, either I shook the hand, my wife. I mean, I can't remember because this was all new at that point,
Yeah.
and so didn't think anything of it. Individual was not sick, showing any symptoms at the time, felt fine. Found out that he started feeling lousy that weekend. Thought he had like the flu. Again, this is early. Like there was barely any cases in the United States, barely anything in Florida at all.
Right.
And so you're thinking, and I remember talking to my doctor friends. I'm like, well, what do you think? The chances of getting it are, I mean, I wouldn't even worry about it. I mean, as far as once he started feeling sick, and so I was smart. And when I got the phone call about 5 days later, it was a Wednesday. And by now I had felt lousy, like the cold, had bad cold. And I got the phone call saying, hey, someone you were around has been, has the COVID-19. You've been exposed. So I was like, oh.
Mhm.
And so I called my doctor and told him what was going on and how I felt. And he said, all right, let's get you and your wife tested, because she was at the same event as I did. As I tell her, she gave it to me. She probably hugged the person or something. It can't be my fault. So it's
Of
much
course.
easier to blame your wife in these situations. And
Yep.
we both went to the Mayo Clinic. She wasn't really feeling many symptoms at the point, but she had been exposed and I was feeling lousy. 2 days later, we found out we had it. And that kind of started a whole new journey for my wife and I and our family, because my two boys ended up getting it. Thankfully, my three girls did not. But it started the whole COVID experience for the Boselli clan.
The test itself is not a fun one, even though it's 10, 20 seconds, right?
No,
That's the thing up the nose that you've seen on the internet.
yeah,
That's what it was, right?
tickles your brain. Yeah, they basically put a swab up there and say we're going to tickle your brain for 20 seconds or so. And I had, I'm trying to think back now, I think it was 7 of those on 7 different occasions through the process, because I had it initially positive, and we'll get into more of this a little bit. Go to the hospital. At the
Yeah.
hospital, once I was admitted, they tested me again, so that's 2. Once I got out, I had to have back-to-back negative tests. So it was 3 negative, 4 came back positive. Now I got to wait again. 5 was positive again. Have to wait another 3 days, and then 6 and 7 finally ended up being negative. So I've had my brain tickled several times, and it is not pleasant. But it is what it is. The good news is a lot of the these great companies we have here in our country, and great scientists and doctors, and also around the world, are finding new methods and better testing and quicker testing. And I mean, I'll go back to when I first got tested. It took 2 days for the Mayo Clinic to get back to me. By the end of it, I was getting results the same day.
Mm.
Now, I mean, so you're going to see the improvement of the technology and everything else. But I got to experience the early days of that swab being. I didn't know you could stick something up my nose that far, and I don't recommend it for anybody.
No, I hope I never have to get it. But I mean, this is the world that we live in. Just, you never know what's going to happen. When you go to the hospital, the symptoms started getting worse for you, right? You started really getting to the point where you were in intensive care. Um, it got pretty scary there for a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah, so I remember. So I got it. It goes from a bad cold to now I feel like I got the flu, but it wasn't in my lungs. So I was like, just felt tired, and I had this fever that I couldn't get rid of. I mean, that I could get rid of with Tylenol, but it would spike every 4 hours. And that was like the process for like 5 or 6 days or so. And I remember, like, I think it was the 6th or 7th day, I actually started feeling better. I'm like, hey, like I've rebounded a little bit, and I'm doing better. And that was a day I remember telling my wife, I'm like, all right, we're on the backside of this. This is going to be great. No problems. I can go to bed that night. I woke up the next morning and I literally said, what happened?
Hmm.
Because now it was in my lungs. Nothing I could do would stop the fever. And I spent that day barely getting either out of bed, off the couch, or I'd go outside in the sun just to try to get some, energy or something,
Yeah.
some sunlight, just to change my backyard. but I would never get up. And I went to bed. And so that day was tough. And I'm like, this is not good. And I had a doctor friend call me and say, how you doing? I said, I thought I was getting better. Now I'm getting worse. And he says, yeah, that's something we're seeing, that like day 6, day 7, this thing can go one or two ways. I'm like, well, I'm going the wrong way right now. And he said, all right. So I went to bed that night, barely slept. And I think it was Wednesday, March 25th. I woke up and now I knew I was really, really sick. And I told my wife what was going on. I go, what do you think? And she says, hey, let's call your doctor again, your Mayo, your primary care physician at Mayo. And I said, all right. So I called and he says, hey, let's get you into the hospital. Let's get you in the emergency room. Let's get you checked out. And Jason, I'll be honest with you, I thought I was going in there just to get some fluids, some meds. And like, hey, come on, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And I go in there, immediately take an x-ray of my chest. And 5 minutes later, the pulmonologist walks into the room and says, hey, we're putting you in the ICU.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? Like, no, like, that's not, like, I'm not going to, I actually told him I do not want to go to the ICU. He says, well, you need to, we need to watch you closely. We don't know where this virus is going and what's happening, and you need oxygen. And he says, not a ventilator, but you need, we need to get your oxygen levels back up. And so, and they wanted to give me, give me the Plaquenil and the Z-Pak, which Plaquenil is the malaria drug. And so to do that, they really had to monitor me. They would give me an EKG, they'd take blood work to make sure I could handle it. And so they put me in the ICU, and it was very scary at times. I think the scariest, was that first night. So, at some point, I remember the pulmonologist coming back in and saying my oxygen levels weren't getting up to where they needed to, so they kept on bumping up the oxygen they were giving me, and I think it got to about 5 liters. I don't know if that's a lot or not. I have no idea medically what that means.
Yeah.
But he said, I remember him saying to me very distinctly, he says, all right, if this doesn't work, or this doesn't get your oxygen level where we want to, we're going to put you on a mask. At the moment, I actually thought he was talking about a ventilator. I found out later he was not. He was talking about just a bigger mask, probably one step before the ventilator. And and I said, okay. And he says, hey, listen, and he said it again, we don't know a lot about this virus right now. And we don't know which direction this is going to go. We're going to give you everything we can. We're going to give you the oxygen. We're going to give you the medicine. But we really don't know. I remember sitting there at that moment thinking, wait a second, this is one of the smartest dudes in the entire world when it comes to like what's going on with medicine and my lungs, because he's a pulmonologist at Mayo, which some would argue is one of the #1 research hospitals in the entire world. And this guy is like, he's in charge. And when he told me he didn't know and they weren't sure what direction with this goes, and you got to think at this point, I'm going in the wrong direction. And if I keep on going that direction, I'm like, what's that mean? And then your mind starts going into a lot of dark places and, scary places of like, am I going to die in the ICU and I'm by myself because my family can't come see me?
Yeah.
All the terrible things. And I think that's where, at those moments, a couple things came into play. One, my faith, obviously. And you have some really serious conversations with God. And people go, did you pray? I said, I don't know if I prayed or just decided to start talking.
Right.
To me, they're the same, but your traditional prayers, like we all have this like rote prayers and what we do. To me, I just started talking like, come on, what, like if it was you and I talking, like, what's going on here? Can you maybe help me out here? This is not really my plan. That obviously really, there was a comfort and a knowing that there was no guarantee. I mean, at that point, but I know that God loves me, cares for me, and I also knew that I had a bunch of people praying for me. And so there was a piece that came there, but also I think being an athlete of fighting and understanding, like not allowing yourself to go to bad places and to get negative, and how you fight and stay in the moment and try to control your thoughts really helped me as well. And so while there was some really scary moments and I did go to some places, thankfully, I was able to fight and get back and try to stay positive and stay in the right mindset. And so, but the first couple nights in the ICU were long nights because you're not sleeping great. You've got stuff hooked up to you. I can't go to, I can't get out of bed to go to the restroom without calling the nurse to come help me. And they're taking blood in the middle of the night. All this stuff's going on. So it's not like I slept a lot.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of, and that's where, it's bad enough when you're at home sometimes. your own safety, your house, and you have long nights, and your mind starts wandering. That's bad enough. About a 10x that, 100x that, 1000x that when you're laying in the ICU and you don't really know, nor do the great doctors that are working with you, what's going to happen.